Welcome to Top Shelf Tech. Today we're going to be talking about Zscaler 6.2, which is the latest release of the Zscaler Internet Access product. We're going to run through a bit of a highlight reel of what the new features are. The Zscaler releases are roughly once every 6 months, depending. So it's a bit of a major update, some cool new features in the platform. And today we have Masaki and Allan from our Zscaler team to run us through what's new.
Cool. Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, so I think it's a really good, exciting opportunity to highlight 6.2 features. There are quite a few features that were released in 6.2, but there are about three features we wanted to go through today in a little bit more detail, and I think that will be really beneficial to some of our customers. So yeah, we can get some slide deck up. And so if you skip to the first slide, yeah. So the first one we want to look at is the dynamic risk-based access policy. Now, Zscaler have always sort of based their policies, their granular policies, on user groups and the destination SaaS destinations or internet-based destinations. They've actually now introducing user risk assessment policies and device postures dynamically. So the benefit of this is on a daily basis, the risk assessment can be built out for each user as a metric, and based on that, coupled with device posture, can determine whether or not a user gets access to SaaS products online.
So device posture we're used to. We've seen it a little bit in ZPA in the past, and so is this part of sort of enhancing that, bringing it into the ZIA product? What's the big change here?
Yeah, exactly. It's the same device posture profiles that you configure for Zscaler Private Access, and it's all about that posture that you can base on whether devices are domain joined, whether they've got certain antivirus installed, or certain endpoint protection agents there as well. So that's really key to this new feature. As before, you could do it with ZPA and segmentation, and that zero trust approach is now enhancing it more for ZIA, which is quite surprising, and it's all coupling together. So on top of that, you've got this user risk assessment score, which is daily updating, and that's generally based on the threats that are detected for users and the sort of user posture, the category-based postures that are being detected. So based on those two, the device posture and the user risk, you have a policy that you can either block or caution for destination.
So we're bringing a lot more into this whole concept of zero trust, like you say. So in the past, we went there's a user, we've got their identity, we know that they're part of a particular group and they can access an application. Now, kind of on that user side, the verify side of that equation, we're saying, let's add in device posture. Let's make sure that they're actually coming from a device that we want accessing this stuff. Let's make sure it's running the latest EDR, whatever our rules are around that. In addition to that, and this is using some of the Zscaler technology that they acquired a while ago, I believe, around machine learning, to actually start to understand what is a dynamic risk around users. So you've got some dynamic controls in there now around, is the device up to date, and dynamically has it shifted? Is it in a good space, a bad space? Plus the user, what's their behavior look like? Are there things that they're doing that look risky that add into this concept of this is who it is that's trying to access this asset of ours, this digital asset over here, and really just lifting up that whole verification phase of the zero trust.
It's just enhancing that proactivity as well, and with that machine learning, it's that automation element of policies adapting and taking care of the posture and blocking and allowing based on that policy. So we're really excited about that, and I think it's going to really benefit our customers. So yeah, can't wait to get that up and running, and we can demo that. So
cool.
On the next part is a similar sort of cyber risk assessment. It's a new report that's come out as part of 6.2, and the good thing about this is something that we were doing a lot in the early days of our Zscaler deployments is we were looking at a sort of a baseline configuration based on URL filtering policies, color control, SSO inspection. And over time, we were coming up with this baseline that we thought was important based on Zscaler best practice security policy. Now what we've got is this new report that's coming out that's now telling customers exactly where there are gaps in that policy and where there might be needs for tune-ups across the whole configuration of ZIA tenant. So we can actually now produce this report for our customers, and we can see where there might be weaknesses and plug those gaps in the policy.
I think that one of the things we've observed is Zscaler is a product. It's SaaS-based. It's got a very intuitive UI. You're not having to think about installing hardware or these sorts of things. So people go, cool, it's easy. And sometimes that means that it's underestimated just how much power the tool has to, how much you can configure what's in there. And therefore, often people might only be using a portion of the features and not really kind of continuing and enhancing what they're doing as new updates come out. And I think, we've found that, we've been able to go into customers and say to them, hey, here's some extra things you should be doing. Now to have a quantifiable baseline from Zscaler to say, here's what Zscaler says alongside, what our advice might be. And it just helps customers, I think, understand, yep, I'm here today. I could actually go do all these things and for no extra cost, get a lot more out of what I've got in the capability today. So I think that's quite important.
Definitely. Yeah. One of those sort of more of a technical example of this is that before with Euro faulting policies, we've now seen the cyber risk report pick up on a policy that ordinarily you wouldn't consider configuring and protecting your organization against, is that miscellaneous and uncategorized destinations, and that can be important against sort of ransomware, those newly spun up domains out there that can be a destination for pulling down command and control packages into the device. So now, as part of this cyber risk report, it highlights that you might be missing that important policy. So a policy would be to, for example, to caution any user going to sites that Zscaler doesn't have a category base for at this point, or miscellaneous. So having that warning is a potential block there and a potential prevention against ransomware attacks. So it's just keeping us in tune with what best practice is really, and making sure that we're getting our customer configuration right first time. Cool. Great. Yeah. So over to you, Masaki.
So Masaki, what do you got?
Right, I got a few things. First thing was the performance test. This is a new performance test feature that Zscaler has released. So this is not included it's not part of ZIA, ZPA. It kind of brings in some of the different components to this new toolset. It's a new webpage called speedtest.zscaler.com that you can essentially visit if you're behind Zscaler service. And it tells you, I guess, similar to what customers used to do using Speedtest or Fast.com. But it's a Zscaler version. And there's additional components to not just running Speedtest, but it makes use of a bit of a ZDX component to give you a bit more visibility between you and the Zscaler Internet Access Service Edge. What I thought I'll do is just show you an example of what it looks like and run a test so we can see. So I'll just run a test here on the screen. It gives you a bit more information around you as a user, where you're coming from. This one here, we're just running a test from our jump host in AWS, so it's showing us Sydney, but it tells you which data center you're connected to, which proxy you're connected to in the background, and you can start the test. Just refresh the page. So what that does is it runs a upload bandwidth. It measures latency. So that's very similar to what you see in your speed test results. But then it gives you the hops between. So there's the cloud path feature that's offered by ZDX. It gives you the different hops between you and Zscaler Internet Access Public Service Edge, what the hops are, what the latency is between different hops. So if you are seeing any issues, this will quickly identify where that problem is. Is it your ISP, or is it your local network? So this is quite cool, and I think it's something that we can make use of a lot when we're doing simple troubleshooting.
And when we're talking about a SASE architecture, right? So this security service edges that we want to be connecting into, we want to make sure that actually our users, wherever they are, and regardless of the ISP, that they have a good connection into that service edge. And typically from that service edge, out from there, that becomes the SASE provider like Zscaler's responsibility to ensure that upstream they have good connectivity into Microsoft and into peering exchanges and to the likes. But really us getting our traffic from the end user to the service edge, that's our responsibility. So this helps us drill into that. And you mentioned as well that it can give you some insight into the local network. So if we've got somebody working from home one day, they're complaining about slow speeds, they could jump on here. We could start to see, is it their Wi-Fi versus is it their ISP? And it will give us a sense of those things.
So the local network part, it's probably not something that we can gain from here, but definitely through ZDX. So ZDX will have all the local network components, your Wi-Fi connectivity, down to your Wi-Fi strength. So ZDX will provide all that capability.
So this gives us that really good first, hey, is there a problem? Is it the ISP? Is it this hop or that hop? So is there a path issue? Then on top of that, if we're having issues with our users, we can be thinking about ZDX, which of course uses the same client, and that will give us all that much more granular information around what could be going on.
It's a matter of visibility that you can get out of ZDX, but also inside ZIA as well. It publishes what kind of latency, ZIA actually added to that traffic. So you do get the end-to-end visibility from as a user, local network, ISP, to public service edge, your end-to-end performance metric using ZDX and ZIA.
And does this feature work only behind the Zscaler client? Will it work with pack files? Will it work if we're on a VPN connected office site?
Yeah, so as long as you're behind ZIA, this is made available. If you're not using ZIA, you can't reach this website. Essentially, how it works.
I think we've seen customers in the past that have used these speed test tools to bypass Zscaler to get an idea of the actual speed. But now this is providing that visibility that they don't need to worry about those other tools.
Cool. What else have you got for us, Masaki?
So there are other features that Zscaler released as part of the 6.2 that are worth mentioning. I won't necessarily draw down on each one, but so there are a few security features. There are some application-related features, and there are some skim ones that I'm sure some of the administrator will appreciate. So I'll just run through them in the list of what we had. First one is the cloud HSM support for intermediate CA certs. So that's if you're using a custom certificate to do things like SSL decryption. In the past, you had to essentially upload your cert and private key to Zscaler. With this cloud HSM support, now you can manage your own private key in your cloud HSM without having to upload it into Zscaler, and that cert gets dynamically used. Other features are things like the cloud app control and user notifications. So if you want to caution a user of visiting a particular cloud application, as an example, you might want to throw up a warning to the user if they're visiting a social networking page, maybe Facebook or Instagram or Dropbox, for example. You can do that using cloud application control now, where before it was only available to the URL control. So they've kind of extended that end user notification feature to cloud app control. We now have cloud application inside the file type control as well. So if you want to, say, allow or block certain files from being downloaded or uploaded, again, you can do that using URL categories in the past. They've now extended that feature to cloud applications. So you can get a bit more granular as to how you block, how you allow different file types. So rather than going, I want to block exe to all of your file share categories, you can now be quite specific as to what you allow.
So we'll allow the exe for, say, Dropbox if that's what we're using, but we'll block it for everything else.
That's right. Yep. So you can get a bit more granular with those policies. Next one is the wildcard FQDN. Wildcard was always supported on the web control, but not necessarily the firewall side of things in Zscaler. So they've now extended that to the network policies.
So this is if you're using advanced firewall or even the basic firewalling.
Yeah, even the basic ones is supported now. So being able to use wildcard, not just specific FQDN.
Yep.
Yeah. There are special use cases where that's really handy. I think we've come across in a few deployments before. There's always some use cases for stuff like that.
Yep.
So I think that'll help with some deployments.
Troubleshooting firewall blocks and policy blocks and
Yeah,
things. If you can
that
use a
also helps
wildcard
too.
temporarily, for example, you can tune in and find out whether that whole domain is being blocked or allowed. So that's
Yep.
really useful.
Cool. Pack file. We all love pack files. So there's been quite a few changes. If you log into the pack file section of the ZIA dashboard now, it does look quite different. I think it caught us off guard a little bit when the 6.2 came out. But essentially, previously we had an ability to view and change pack file. You had to be quite careful because we were able to verify the configuration, make sure the configuration was correct. But if you push out a wrong change, you couldn't go back, or you had to keep a copy of by yourself. You have to manage the version control. Where now it's all built into the ZIA dashboard, so you can essentially clone the current pack file, create a new version, deploy it, and then if you make a mistake with your pack file configuration, you can always go have a look at the different versions and revert back to the safe version. So that whole version control is now available inside the ZIA dashboard.
And we still see quite a number of deployments, typically older ones that use pack files, don't we? And it's useful. Often that's an enterprise as well, and so it's a useful feature, I guess, in controlling that for a little while. But while we sort of encourage people across to the client connector.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there's a level of pack file configuration in
the ZCC
as well. Yeah, for things like subcloud, especially for us.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it is a high impact change. Sometimes there's a lot of risk involved with making a one-line change to a pack file.
Yeah.
So having this version control is a real quick and easy way of having a rollback ability through your change approval system.
Yep. It can be quite complex too. I mean, we've seen pack files that are
big pack,
a couple of lines too.
Just
pages and pages.
Yeah. It's like the old firewall sections that just grew over time until there's all these rules in there that nobody can remember what they were there for, right?
That's right. It's hard to go back and clean up because you might not know what it did. Maybe it's a change that you put in.
Somebody's written some custom JavaScript in a pack file that nobody else understands. That you're like,
and of course we see people when they migrate to Zscaler, sometimes they'll bring stuff across from their existing pack files, which is not exactly ideal, but it's the reality.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, pack files. Yeah, so we
stop talking about pack files in this.
So the next one is subcloud management. So subcloud is something that as a company with a lot of customers based in NZ, in order to use the Auckland node, we had to use subcloud. That's still the case. In the past, that was all managed by Zscaler. We can actually see how the subcloud is configured, and if you want to disable certain data center from your subcloud, let's say Zscaler is doing a maintenance on the Auckland node, and you want to temporarily migrate all of the customers, all of the users to Sydney during the maintenance window, you can just go and untick Auckland from your subcloud. And when you do that, essentially all of your users switch to using Sydney. And once the maintenance is over, you can then switch it back.
How does that work in reality? So you've got the Zscaler client, for example, it's got a tunnel built, and that will just build a second tunnel and then seamlessly cut the traffic across. You won't see anything.
So new sessions will start going to the new, the second data center. I think GCC creates 3 different connections actually to primary, secondary, and tertiary.
Okay.
But being able to manage that and actually see how it's configured, I think it's quite useful, because before we didn't really get any visibility or control over subcloud.
And it's that, we've had a couple of questions recently about we've got now with people being able to travel a lot. We've had some questions around users, customers going off to say India or the US, and they'll always ask, what about if I travel? Will my traffic be backhauled all the way to Auckland node? no, we can look in the subcloud and we can see which Zscaler data centers are in that cloud, and we can say, yeah, it's fine. Mumbai's in there, and West Coast US is in there, whatever, and we can actually assure the customer that their traffic is going to be geolocated correctly.
Yeah, awesome.
Right, so the last two, they both relate to SCIM. One is being able to delete administrator users. So we use SAML. Often customers use Azure AD to manage single sign-on to ZIA dashboard.
And SCIM's a provisioning protocol that supports single sign-on.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. Yep. So especially useful if you're using Azure AD.
Yep.
Previously, there was no real integration around SCIM for the administrators, but what they've done here is they now support the deletion of the admin users through SCIM. So it's especially important if someone leaves the company.
Yep.
Sometimes get forgotten. They might not necessarily go into the ZIA dashboard and remove the admin user.
Yep.
So now if you delete that user in Azure AD, SCIM will then automatically delete that admin user from the dashboard.
So you'd still manually add a new admin. So
Correct,
of course, then if there's a breach on Active Directory and somebody creates new admin accounts, they don't get them in Zscaler, which is great. But then if you remove admin accounts, they get removed automatically. So to your point around cleanup, when somebody leaves the organization, that all starts to happen automatically.
Yep. So that's one feature. The other one is the event logs. Until now, we didn't really get to see what was happening around the SCIM. This is for the user provisioning. So we didn't quite know what was happening. We had to rely on the IDP logs to see, is it actually syncing? What are the user groups that are getting pushed from SCIM? Now we see that in Zscaler under the event log, so we can see all that SCIM activity, whether the new users are getting created, deleted, or maybe group memberships changing. So all of that logs are now available in the ZIA dashboard. Yeah,
great.
That's all.
Awesome. Well, look, thanks a lot for taking us through those the new features today, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks. I believe we're going to be talking about ZPA and some of the new features that have come to ZPA that we haven't covered today. So a bit more of a deep dive, and yeah, Zscaler Private Access, just looking at some of the enhancements that have recently come out there. Thanks for joining us.